Karen was not your typical tourist. She wasn't the kind of person who carried a map or snapped photos with genuine curiosity. Instead, she traveled the world with an air of superiority, convinced that her money and status made her better than everyone else. Her designer clothes, oversized sunglasses, and constant complaints about everything, from the weather to the food, made her stand out in any crowd. This time, she had arrived in London with her family, her quiet husband, Mark, and their two teenage kids, Lily and Ethan, who often rolled their eyes at their mother's behavior. The trip started like most others. Karen insisted on staying at the fanciest hotel, demanded the best table at every restaurant, and complained endlessly when things didn't go her way. By the second day, even Mark looked exhausted from trying to keep her in line. That morning, they decided to visit Buckingham Palace, one of London's most iconic landmarks. The kids were excited to see the palace and the famous royal guards, but Karen only cared about how many likes her Instagram pictures would get. As they approached the palace gates, Karen immediately began critiquing everything. "Why are these guards so stiff? Do they even move?" she asked loudly, drawing annoyed looks from other tourists. Mark tried to shush her, but Karen ignored him. "I mean, seriously, what's the point of standing there like robots? They're supposed to entertain us." Her voice grew louder with each word, and people around her started stepping away, sensing trouble brewing. Lily and Ethan exchanged embarrassed glances. "Mom, can you please stop?" Lily whispered, tugging at Karen's sleeve, but Karen waved her off. "Oh, relax, sweetheart. It's just a joke." To her, it was all harmless fun, but to everyone else, it felt disrespectful. The royal guards weren't just performers. They represented centuries of tradition and discipline. Yet Karen couldn't, or wouldn't, understand that. While the family waited for the changing of the guard ceremony to begin, Karen wandered off toward a nearby vendor selling colorful paint pots. At first glance, the paints seemed meant for children's crafts, but something about them caught Karen's attention. An idea sparked in her mind, an idea that would soon spiral out of control. She picked up a bright blue pot and turned it over in her hands, smirking as though she just discovered the perfect prank. "What are you doing?" Mark asked cautiously when he noticed the mischievous gleam in her eyes. Karen shrugged casually. "Just having a little fun," she replied, her tone dripping with arrogance. Before anyone could stop her, she marched back toward the guards, fully intending to make a scene. Little did she know, her actions would have far-reaching consequences, not just for her, but for everyone involved. Unaware of the storm about to break, the crowd continued watching the ceremony, blissfully ignorant of the chaos Karen was about to unleash. And as she stepped closer to the unsuspecting guard, the tension in the air grew thicker, setting the stage for a moment that would change lives forever. Karen's mind was racing as she clutched the small pot of blue paint. To her, this wasn't just a random act of mischief. It was her chance to prove a point, though no one had asked her to make one. In her head, the guard's rigid posture and refusal to react to anything around them were laughable, even insulting. She muttered under her breath, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Look at them, standing there like statues. What's the big deal? They're not doing anything useful." Her words drew a few disapproving glances, but Karen didn't care. If anything, it fueled her need to act. As the ceremony continued, Karen grew more impatient. The rhythmic marching of the guards and the distant notes of the band only irritated her further. She leaned toward her husband, Mark, who stood silently beside her, gripping his phone tightly. "This is so boring," she declared loudly. "I could do something way more interesting than these guys." Mark shot her a nervous look, knowing exactly what she meant. He tried to intervene, whispering urgently, "Karen, don't. Just leave it alone. People are watching." But Karen brushed him off with an exaggerated wave of her hand. "Oh, relax, Mark. It's just a little fun. Nobody's going to care." Fun, however, wasn't how anyone else would describe what she was about to do. Her kids, Lily and Ethan, exchanged horrified looks, sensing that their mom was about to cross a line they couldn't come back from. "Mom, please, don't embarrass us," Ethan pleaded softly, tugging at her arm. But Karen ignored him too. Her focus was entirely on the nearest guard, a young man named James, whose stoic expression seemed to mock her very existence. With a smirk playing on her lips, Karen took a step forward, then another, until she was standing alarmingly close to James. Tourists around her began to notice, murmuring amongst themselves. Some looked amused, thinking it might be part of the show. Others appeared uneasy, sensing that something was off. A woman standing nearby tried to warn Karen, saying, "Ma'am, you shouldn't get so close. You'll get in trouble." But Karen scoffed. "Trouble? For what? They're just standing there." Then, without hesitation, she unscrewed the lid of the paint pot and tilted it over James's head. Bright blue liquid cascaded down, splashing onto his pristine red uniform and dripping down his bearskin hat. Gasps erupted from the crowd, followed by stunned silence. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. James remained perfectly still, his face unreadable, adhering strictly to protocol despite the humiliation unfolding before him. His training kept him rooted in place, but inside, he felt a mix of shock and frustration. The crowd quickly turned hostile. Parents shielded their children's eyes, while others whipped out their phones to capture the scene. Security personnel rushed toward Karen, shouting for her to stop as she stood there, smug and defiant, holding the now empty paint pot. "What?" she snapped, glaring at the guards approaching her. "It's just paint. Get over it." But her defiance only made things worse. Within seconds, she was surrounded, her family staring in disbelief as officers led her away. As the chaos unfolded, whispers rippled through the crowd. "Who does she think she is?" one man asked angrily. "She's ruining everything," added a woman, shaking her head. Meanwhile, James stood silently, the paint still dripping down his uniform, a symbol of dignity amidst the madness. Little did Karen realize, her attempt at fun had set off a chain reaction that would change her life, and his, forever. The seconds after Karen poured the paint felt like an eternity. The crowd, once buzzing with excitement over the changing of the guard ceremony, was now electrified with shock and outrage. Parents shielded their children's eyes, some gasped in disbelief, and others whipped out their phones to record the scene unfolding before them. Videos captured every detail, the bright blue paint dripping down James's immaculate uniform, his unwavering composure, and Karen's smug expression as she stood there holding the empty pot. It was a spectacle no one could look away from. James, despite the humiliation, did not flinch. His training kicked in, reminding him that he represented something far greater than himself, the history, discipline, and pride of the Royal Guards. He remained motionless, his face a mask of professionalism, though inside he battled a storm of emotions. Anger, frustration, and even a hint of sadness swirled within him. This wasn't just about him. It was an attack on the institution he had dedicated years of his life to serve. But showing any reaction would only give her the satisfaction she seemed to crave, and he refused to let that happen. Security personnel acted swiftly, surrounding Karen before she could do anything else. "Step back, ma'am," one officer barked firmly, grabbing her arm. Karen tried to pull away, her bravado faltering for the first time. "It's just paint," she protested loudly, attempting to justify her actions. "He's fine. Why is everyone making such a big deal out of this?" Her voice carried across the courtyard, earning more glares from the crowd. No one bought her excuses. To them, this wasn't just vandalism. It was an act of disrespect toward a cherished tradition. As officers escorted Karen away, her family trailed behind, looking mortified. Mark, her husband, kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Lily and Ethan, her teenage kids, looked like they wanted to disappear. Ethan whispered under his breath, "This is so embarrassing," while Lily clutched her phone tightly, scrolling through social media feeds that were already lighting up with videos of the incident. Hashtags like hashtag Paintgate and hashtag disrespectful tourist began trending within minutes, turning what happened into a global conversation. Meanwhile, James became the center of attention, not because of the paint staining his uniform, but because of how gracefully he handled the situation. Tourists approached him cautiously, offering words of support. "You did great," said an elderly man, patting him gently on the shoulder. A young woman handed him a tissue, saying, "I'm so sorry this happened to you." James nodded politely, thanking them without breaking protocol. Despite the chaos around him, he stayed focused, determined to finish his duty. Back at the security office, Karen continued to argue, insisting she hadn't done anything wrong. "It's just a prank," she repeated, pacing back and forth. Officers ignored her protests, documenting the incident meticulously. They confiscated her belongings, including the now empty paint pot, and informed her that formal charges would follow. By then, news outlets had picked up the story, broadcasting images of the paint-covered guard and the entitled tourist who thought she was above the rules. Outside, the mood shifted. People gathered near the palace gates, discussing what they had witnessed. Some expressed sympathy for James, praising his restraint. Others condemned Karen, calling her behavior selfish and immature. Social media exploded with memes mocking her actions, turning her into an instant villain. What started as a single reckless decision spiraled into a full-blown scandal, setting the stage for consequences Karen couldn't yet imagine. For James, the ordeal wasn't over. As he finally stepped away from his post to clean up, he knew his life, and Karen's, would never be the same again. The fallout from Karen's actions was swift and merciless. Within hours, the video of her pouring paint on James went viral, spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. By evening, it had reached millions of viewers worldwide, sparking outrage and disbelief. News outlets picked up the story, replaying the clip endlessly while commentators dissected every detail. To many, Karen wasn't just a foolish tourist. She had become a symbol of privilege gone unchecked. Someone who thought she was above the rules simply because of her wealth and attitude. Back home, the backlash hit Karen hard. Her interior design business, once thriving and respected, began crumbling almost overnight. Clients who had praised her work suddenly canceled contracts, citing her behavior as a deal-breaker. "We don't want to associate with someone like that," one email read bluntly. Others posted screenshots of their cancellations online, adding fuel to the growing fire against her. Employees at her firm, already tired of her demanding and condescending management style, started quitting in droves. One former worker even shared a lengthy post about how Karen treated staff poorly, accusing her of being racist and discriminatory. The accusations piled up, painting a picture of someone deeply disliked and mistrusted by those around her. Karen's personal life wasn't spared either. Neighbors who once tolerated her loud personality now avoided her completely, embarrassed to be associated with her. Some even put their homes up for sale, claiming they didn't want to live near that woman. Friends stopped answering her calls, and invitations to parties or events dried up entirely. Even her family felt the strain. Mark, her husband, grew increasingly distant, unable to defend her actions any longer. Their kids, Lily and Ethan, begged to stay with relatives, ashamed to face classmates who mocked them relentlessly. For the first time in her life, Karen found herself utterly alone. Meanwhile, James became an unexpected hero. People admired his calmness and professionalism during the incident, seeing him as a symbol of dignity and strength. Supporters rallied around him, flooding social media with messages of encouragement. Strangers sent letters and gifts to Buckingham Palace, thanking him for representing grace under pressure. Local businesses even offered free meals and discounts to honor him, turning the young guard into a beloved figure overnight. James, though humbled by the attention, remained grounded, focusing on his duties and trying to move past the chaos. As the days passed, Karen's attempts to justify herself fell flat. In interviews, she claimed she didn't mean anything by it and described the incident as a harmless prank gone wrong. But no one bought her excuses. Instead, people dug deeper into her past, uncovering more examples of her entitled behavior. Former employees came forward with stories of mistreatment, describing how she would belittle them or make racially insensitive remarks. These revelations only added to the public's disdain, solidifying her image as someone who cared little for others' feelings or boundaries. By the end of the week, Karen's world had collapsed. Her reputation was in tatters, her finances were dwindling, and her relationships were strained beyond repair. What had started as a moment of impulsiveness had spiraled into a full-blown catastrophe, leaving her scrambling to pick up the pieces. For James, however, the incident marked a turning point. While he still carried the memory of that day, the blue paint dripping down his uniform, he chose to rise above it, using the experience to inspire others and advocate for respect and understanding. Two lives, forever changed by one reckless act, stood on opposite ends of the spectrum: ruin and redemption. The court of public opinion proved to be just as unforgiving, if not more so, than any legal system. Social media became a battleground, with hashtags like #KarenMustPay and #RespectOurHeroes dominating timelines. Memes mocking Karen's actions flooded platforms, turning her into a laughingstock. One particularly popular meme showed her face photoshopped onto a toddler throwing a tantrum, captioned, "When privilege meets poor decisions." The internet had no mercy, and Karen quickly became the poster child for entitled behavior gone horribly wrong. News outlets weren't far behind, digging deeper into her life and uncovering troubling patterns. Reporters interviewed former employees who described her workplace as toxic, claiming she routinely made derogatory comments about people of different races and backgrounds. One ex-employee recounted how Karen once referred to a colleague as lazy because of their ethnicity, while another shared how she dismissed suggestions from non-white team members, saying they didn't understand high standards. These stories painted a damning picture of someone who not only lacked empathy, but actively fostered division. As these revelations spread, the backlash intensified. Local businesses that had previously partnered with her design firm severed ties, fearing association with her tarnished name. Even suppliers refused to work with her, citing concerns about their own reputations. Her once thriving company, known for its luxurious projects and elite clientele, now sat empty, its offices gathering dust. Employees who remained loyal until the end finally walked out, leaving Karen to face the wreckage alone. Her attempts at damage control only made things worse. In a desperate bid to salvage her image, Karen posted a video apology on social media. Sitting in front of a blank wall, she read from a prepared statement, claiming she never intended to hurt anyone and that her actions were misunderstood. But her delivery was flat, devoid of genuine remorse. Viewers immediately called her out, accusing her of being insincere and self-serving. Comments flooded in, tearing apart her words. "This isn't an apology, it's a PR stunt," one user wrote. Another added, "Own up to what you did instead of making excuses." Even her family couldn't escape the scrutiny. Mark, her husband, faced questions about why he hadn't stopped her sooner, while Lily and Ethan dealt with relentless bullying at school. Classmates taunted them with chants of "paint ladies' kids," forcing the teenagers to withdraw socially. At home, tensions ran high. Mark avoided conversations about the incident, retreating into silence, while Karen alternated between lashing out in anger and wallowing in self-pity. The rift between them grew wider with each passing day. Meanwhile, James continued to rise above the negativity. He used the attention to highlight issues close to his heart, such as mental health awareness among military personnel and the importance of respecting cultural traditions. Interviews and public appearances showcased his humility and grace, earning him even more admiration. People admired not just his professionalism during the incident, but also his ability to turn adversity into advocacy. For Karen, however, there was no redemption in sight. Every attempt to justify herself backfired. pushing her further into isolation. Friends turned into strangers, acquaintances distanced themselves, and even extended family members stopped inviting her to gatherings. The woman who once thrived on attention now dreaded it, unable to step outside without facing judgmental stares or whispered insults. Public shaming had stripped her of everything she valued, her reputation, her career, and her sense of belonging, and left her grappling with the harsh reality of her choices. As the weeks turned into months, it became clear that Karen's downfall wasn't just a temporary scandal, it was a life-altering reckoning. While James inspired others with his resilience and dignity, Karen served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that privilege and arrogance come with consequences, and sometimes those consequences are irreversible. The legal battle that followed was as brutal as the public shaming Karen had endured. She found herself in a courtroom, facing charges of public disorder and vandalism. The prosecution painted her actions as reckless and disrespectful, emphasizing the global outrage her behavior had sparked. Her defense team tried to argue that it was a momentary lapse in judgment, but the evidence against her, videos, witness statements, and even her own social media posts, was overwhelming. In the end, the judge handed down a sentence that left Karen reeling. A hefty fine, mandatory community service, and court-mandated sensitivity training sessions. The financial blow was staggering. Between legal fees, fines, and lost business revenue, Karen's once impressive fortune dwindled rapidly. For someone who had always equated wealth with success, this loss hit especially hard. She was forced to sell her luxury car, her designer wardrobe, and eventually her sprawling home, moving into a modest apartment on the outskirts of town. The contrast between her old life and her new reality was jarring. Gone were the days of extravagant vacations and high-end shopping sprees. Now she struggled to budget for groceries and utility bills. But the punishment didn't stop there. As part of her sentence, Karen was required to attend public speaking engagements at schools and community centers, where she was expected to discuss respect, cultural sensitivity, and accountability. These appearances were humiliating. Audiences often heckled her, calling her out for her past behavior or mocking her attempts at sincerity. "How does it feel to ruin your own life?" one teenager shouted during a school assembly, leaving Karen visibly shaken. Despite these challenges, the court insisted she complete the program, hoping it would force her to confront the damage she had caused. Meanwhile, James decided to take legal action of his own. With the support of his superiors and legal advisors, he filed a civil lawsuit against Karen for emotional distress. The case argued that her actions had not only humiliated him publicly, but also disrupted his mental well-being and career trajectory. The trial brought renewed attention to the incident, with media outlets revisiting the story and dissecting every detail. When the verdict came in, it was another blow to Karen. She was ordered to pay substantial damages, effectively wiping out what little remained of her savings. Though some might have seen this as justice served, Karen refused to accept responsibility. During interviews about the lawsuit, she complained bitterly, claiming she was being unfairly targeted. "I already apologized. What more do they want from me?" she ranted to anyone who would listen. But her words rang hollow. To the public, her complaints sounded like excuses, further cementing her image as someone incapable of genuine remorse. James, on the other hand, handled the outcome with quiet dignity. He donated a portion of the settlement money to charities supporting military personnel and their families, reinforcing his commitment to giving back. Friends and colleagues praised him for turning a negative experience into something positive. "He didn't let bitterness consume him," one fellow guard remarked. "Instead, he used it to make a difference." For Karen, the legal repercussions were just the beginning of a long road ahead. Stripped of her wealth, status, and pride, she faced a future filled with uncertainty. While James moved forward with purpose and grace, Karen remained trapped in a cycle of denial and resentment. The stark contrast between their paths served as a powerful reminder. Accountability isn't just about facing consequences, it's about learning from them. And so far, Karen showed no signs of doing either. Life after the scandal was a harsh adjustment for Karen. Stripped of her wealth and status, she had to navigate a world that no longer catered to her whims. Her once luxurious lifestyle was replaced by cramped quarters in a modest apartment, where peeling wallpaper and creaky floors served as constant reminders of how far she had fallen. She took up odd jobs to make ends meet, working as a cashier at a local grocery store and cleaning offices late at night. For someone who had spent years barking orders at others, these humbling roles were a bitter pill to swallow. Her coworkers noticed her sharp tongue and condescending attitude almost immediately. "She acts like she's too good for this place," one muttered under their breath during a break. Karen overheard but said nothing, though her clenched jaw betrayed her frustration. Over time, however, the monotony of her new routine began to wear her down. The long hours, the lack of respect from others, and the haunting memories of her past mistakes weighed heavily on her. Some days, she would sit alone in her tiny kitchen, staring blankly at the wall, wondering if she could ever rebuild her life, or if anyone would let her. Mark filed for separation shortly after the trial ended. He couldn't bear the constant tension or Karen's refusal to take responsibility for her actions. Their kids, Lily and Ethan, chose to live with him, further isolating her. Family dinners became a distant memory, replaced by awkward phone calls filled with uncomfortable silences. On weekends, when Mark picked them up for visits, the children barely spoke to her, their eyes glued to their phones as they avoided engaging. It was clear they resented her, not just for embarrassing them publicly, but for dragging their family name through the mud. While Karen struggled to adapt, James thrived. Free from the shadow of the incident, he poured his energy into mentoring young recruits at the Palace Barracks. His calm demeanor and first-hand experience with adversity made him an invaluable role model. "You'll face tough moments out there," he told a group of nervous new guards during training. "But remember, your strength isn't measured by how you react. It's about staying true to yourself." His words resonated deeply, earning him admiration not only as a guard but also as a leader. James also began speaking publicly about mental health within the armed forces, advocating for better support systems for those dealing with stress and trauma. His advocacy work caught the attention of national organizations, leading to invitations to conferences and panel discussions. Each appearance reinforced his reputation as a man of integrity and compassion. People admired him not just for enduring the paint incident, but for using it as a stepping stone to inspire others. For Karen, redemption seemed like a distant dream. Though some suggested she might learn humility from her struggles, old habits die hard. She continued to blame everyone else for her downfall. The media, social media users, even James himself. "They're punishing me for one mistake," she fumed to a coworker one evening. But deep down, she knew the truth. Her downfall wasn't caused by a single act. It was the culmination of years of arrogance and disrespect. Still, there were fleeting moments when Karen appeared to soften. Late at night, sitting alone in her dimly lit apartment, she sometimes scrolled through articles about James. Reading about his achievements stirred something inside her, a mix of envy and regret. Could she have handled things differently? Could she still turn her life around? These questions lingered unanswered, buried beneath layers of pride and denial. Redemption, if it came at all, would require more than hollow apologies or half-hearted attempts at change. It would demand honesty, effort, and a willingness to confront the person she had been, and the person she wanted to become. Years passed, and the world moved on, but the story of Karen and James remained etched in public memory, a tale of recklessness and resilience, arrogance and accountability. For Karen, life became a series of small, quiet struggles. She eventually stopped fighting against her circumstances and settled into a routine that left little room for ambition or dreams. Her odd jobs kept her afloat, though barely, and she learned to live without the luxuries she once took for granted. The vibrant social circle she had boasted about was long gone, replaced by lonely evenings spent watching TV or scrolling through old photos of happier times. Occasionally, people would recognize her at the grocery store or while walking down the street. Some stared silently, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disdain. Others whispered behind her back, calling her the paint lady or worse. A few brave souls confronted her directly, asking why she hadn't changed after everything that happened. Karen usually brushed them off with a muttered excuse or walked away quickly, unable to face their judgment. Deep inside, however, these encounters gnawed at her, planting seeds of doubt about whether she deserved a second chance or if she even wanted one. Her relationship with her family remained strained. Mark remarried someone kinder and more patient, leaving Karen feeling abandoned and bitter. Lily and Ethan grew up fast, learning early on how to navigate life without leaning on their mother's approval. They visited her less frequently over the years, and when they did, conversations were polite but distant. Once close-knit, the family now felt like strangers bound only by blood. Karen often wondered if things could have been different, if she had acted differently, but the thought brought more pain than clarity. James, meanwhile, continued to inspire those around him. After retiring honorably from his duties as a Royal Guard, he dedicated himself full-time to mentoring young recruits and advocating for mental health awareness among military personnel. His speeches resonated deeply, drawing standing ovations at conferences and heartfelt thanks from individuals who found courage in his words. He became a symbol not just of dignity under pressure, but also of growth and purpose, a man who turned adversity into opportunity. Despite their vastly different paths, whispers of Karen still followed James wherever he went. Journalists occasionally asked him about her during interviews, probing for any lingering resentment or anger. But James always responded with grace, saying simply, "What she did taught me a lot about patience and forgiveness. I choose to focus on the positives instead of dwelling on the negatives." His ability to rise above bitterness earned him even more respect, solidifying his legacy as someone who truly embodied strength of character. As for Karen, opinions remained divided. Some believed she had suffered enough and deserved a chance to rebuild her life quietly. Others argued that her lack of genuine remorse showed she hadn't learned anything from her mistakes. Social media debates raged on, with hashtags like #WhereIsKarenNow resurfacing periodically. To most, she remained a cautionary tale, a reminder of how unchecked privilege and entitlement can lead to ruin. In the end, Karen's story served as both a warning and a lesson. It highlighted the fragility of reputation and the importance of humility, respect, and accountability. While James stood tall as proof that resilience and integrity can overcome even the darkest moments, Karen lingered in the shadows, a testament to what happens when ego blinds us to our own flaws. Redemption, it seemed, was possible, but only for those willing to seek it honestly and wholeheartedly. And as the years rolled on, the contrast between their lives offered a powerful narrative. Our choices define us, and sometimes they shape us forever.